Hello there and welcome back. My name is Cynthia Wakio, the Communication and Events Manager at Corporate Staffing Services. And I am joined by Paminas, and we're going to be speaking about how you can develop a HR policy. Paminas, karibu, and I want you to start us off by telling us the importance of a HR policy in any organization.
So a HR policy is a very important document, and for these three reasons. Number one, it governs the relationship between an employer and an employee. So think about it like a constitution, just like the same way the Republic of Kenya, you have our constitution, that's the work of the HR policy. So apart from governing the relationship between the employer and the employee, the HR policy, it also outlines some aspect of the labor laws that the employer and the employee need to be compliant. So remember, again, apart from, there's a third party to the relationship between the employer and the employee, and the third party is the government. So the government has come up with the labor laws that we need to adhere to, and it's for both parties. It's not only applicable to the employer, it's also not just applicable to the employee. So a HR policy, then what you can do, you can pick on the important aspect or the things that you feel that you need to emphasize and have them in your HR policy. Yeah. The other thing that is important in a HR policy is that a HR policy is also able to communicate the management or leadership wishes. For example, when it comes to the Employment Act says an employee is supposed to work 6 days in a week and take a rest 1 day. So it doesn't say that you work on Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday, or Thursday. So management can say, for us, we work from Monday up to Friday. We don't work on Saturday. Or they can say also in terms of reporting hours, as we report at 8, we leave at 5. So there are some aspects which are left now to the employer, and then the employer is able to have them documented in a HR policy. So in a nutshell, I would say that's the work of the HR policy. Number one, to govern the relationship between the employer and the employee. Number two, to outline some aspects of the labor laws. And number three is to be able to communicate the management wishes. And also, when you're talking about the labor laws, the law events, there are some aspects of the HR policy that the law requires you to have. For example, if you have a certain number of staff, you're supposed to have a sexual harassment policy. I think it's 20 or 25 employees. That's something I can confirm. Then there's also the occupational safety and health. So as you can see, there are some key requirements. That indeed, you may not have all the other areas of HR policy, but if you have this number of staff, you must ensure that you have a sexual harassment policy, and then also in terms of safety.
So factors that you've mentioned considered, how do you develop now a HR policy? So
I'll share with you the best practices. What do you need to look at now when you're coming up with a HR policy? Number one, the first thing you need to adhere to is the labor laws. Why? Because your HR policy cannot go contra to the labor laws. For example, the minimum leave days as of today is 21 days, so you can't give your staff 16 days. If it's maternity, you find it's 90 calendar days. You can't say now you'll be going 60 because they're very hardworking. Paternity, the law also provides. So the thing you can do is, when it comes to the labor laws, the much you can do is enhance. So for example, and I'm sure you've seen this with other companies, so whereas the law, the annual leave a minimum of 21 days, some companies do 30 days. So long as it's a benefit to the employee and you're not going against the law, you can have that in your HR policy. You can enhance. So that's number one, to pay attention to the labor laws. Number two is to look at management wishes. So like I said, different organizations, there's a way they would want to run their company. And that is why it helps to customize your HR policy, as opposed to going online and picking a draft and launching it as your own HR policy. So management wishes, like I said, reporting time, dress code, some transport, how do we deal with allowance, if you are sick, how do you communicate, all those kind of things now. So they can vary from one organization to another. The third thing is what I would call best practices in the industry or sector, because you also can't go contra You can't go opposite what your peers are doing because you're in competition for talent, you know, in the same sector. I'll give you an example. If it comes to NGOs, most NGOs, they don't work on Saturday. So you'd imagine now if you have a HR policy that says, oh, Saturday is a working day for us, you report at 9, you leave at 4 p.m. You're going to lose out on talent because people who've worked in the NGO space, they expect either to work until Friday, and sometimes I find, especially for international NGOs, they work even Friday half day. Yeah. So it's to look at the best practices and ensure that you are more or less fitting in with your industry or sector. And the last one to consider is obviously the employee wishes. And if they are unionizable, the trade union. Because these are key parties to the relationship. So it will be good also to factor their input, get to hear what are they looking for, what are their suggestions. Yeah. So that way, if you look at those 4 things, you'll be good to go. Yeah.
Because most people just copy and paste.
Yeah, it's a bit sad because it's such an important document, and nowadays it's a risk because again, just like we were discussing on the employment contract, whatever you put there is binding. And it's you, it's not the employee who developed the policy, it is you. So I found scenarios where someone, a HR came, they got the HR policy, they just changed the name. So instead of this company, they put corporate staffing. And then the staff signed. So again, at the time of exit, when there's a fight, you know, that's when we get to know people's true colors. Someone goes to the HR policy and say, oh, one of the benefits is you're supposed to do ABCD. But you didn't give me. So the company wonders, when did you start doing that? They've never done that, but it's in the HR policy. And it's signed. It's signed, So you have to, if it's in such a document, you don't have an option. The other instances where you find things like disciplinary process, different. An SME, the way an SME would handle disciplinary process is a bit different from government. It's also very different from a multinational, where the outcome should be the same in the sense that you want to take this employee through a due process. However, you find it's very different. There are many things you can do to arrive at the same goal, but if you're not careful, if you just copy your friend, you may end up losing. So leading me to ask, how now can CSS help employers avoid these mistakes? So how we engage employers, number one is to meet with them one-on-one, get to understand their pain points. For example, why do you want to come up with a HR policy? What are you trying to cure? Then from there is to advise them. Based on your size, based on your industry sector, this is what you've seen work. You know, this is what you need to have. This is how your table of content you look like. And then from there, then we develop a policy for them. And the way we go about it is, by segment you send to you in there. We tell you, okay, review this, does it make sense? We put a tick, then we move to the next until we are done. And then when you are done, we launch it now to the entire organization or to the management. So this will involve some form of training, you know, to bring the team up to speed. And then from there, we launch it because a HR policy can only be varied if the employee has signed and said, oh, they consent to this, and they understand the content and they consent to this. It's as simple as that. So if you're watching this video and you're thinking about either upgrading your current HR policy or you don't want an expert to have a look at it, then please reach out and we'll be able to be of assistance. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you for watching. And following up what Paminas has said, we have left a link with more information in the description box where you can find out more about this service and find out how you can reach out to us. Thank you, and we'll see you in the next video.